You're watching the PoliticIt podcast.
Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt podcast. I'm Senator John Johnson. Tonight we've got Maury Giles with us. Maury, of course, you're the CEO now of Braver Angels, right?
I am.
And let's talk a little bit about you.
Okay.
I mean, it was interesting to me when you took this position. But let's go back and kind of talk about what got you where you are today. What were you doing beforehand, and where'd you grow up? And
Absolutely. Well, I was born in Utah. My parents were both going to BYU. I was kid number two. We left shortly after because they graduated shortly after I was born. And
what were they studying?
My dad was in electrical engineering. My mom in health science and physical education. Yeah. She was a heavy athlete at a young age, passionate about sports. And
interesting.
She shares so many stories about how she was so frustrated when she was in high school that the girls could only go to half court and then they had to pass the ball to the next person. In fact, my mom and dad, when they met, it was my mom that invited my dad to go to the BYU football game, and she was the one cheering on, even though my dad had played football and everything. But my mom is definitely the athlete in the family. Yeah, I'm passionate about that. But I come from Utah stock, the Giles family out of the Heber area. My grandfather, my grandfather, he and their 12 siblings, they're from a stock where these two half brothers who came across from England about 1858, and Giles, there's Giles everywhere around here. But and then,
so what part of England are they? Is that
Nottinghamshire? Yeah. That's where they come from. And then the other part of my family is the Fugels. So my grandmother was Joyce Fugel, Boyd Fugel's sister, and so obviously there's a few Fugel names around here.
Yeah, Brandon Fugel.
Exactly. His dad and my dad were cousins and good friends.
Interesting.
Good friends. But yeah, so I grew up though. We lived all over the place as a kid, John, but we ended up moving back to we moved to New Mexico. We moved to New Mexico, and so I spent most of my growing up years in New Mexico.
So that's where you went to high school and
Just went to high school, ended up coming up to BYU for college, went on a mission to Arizona, so from New Mexico and served in Arizona.
Oh, interesting.
That was a fun moment when I thought it said the Arizona Temple mission, but it was the Arizona Tempe mission. And while I was on my mission, they actually ended up splitting that mission to get 3 in the state, because there were only 2, but the new mission had my hometown in it. And so I begged the mission president and said, can you move me up into the other mission? But so I served my mission there, went back to BYU, but when I got married, I ended up going back to New Mexico State, where I had come from, and so I studied there, ended up getting journalism and communication studies, a double major, and started as a journalist, actually, working as a reporter.
Wow. So who did you work for?
Yeah, so it's funny, I have a Utah connection in that as well, because I went down, I was still in college, taking journalism classes and communication studies, but I went down to the local newspaper, the Las Cruces Sun News, and I said, hey, can I write stories for you? And I don't care if I get paid, I just want to, And they
want to learn.
Yeah, I want to learn. So they came in, they gave me a little press badge, which I found out later they literally made up that day for me, and I thought it was real. I got so excited about it. And I went down, they said, Governor Bruce King is speaking down in Gadsden outside of El Paso. You should go meet him, and we can't send anybody, so write a story. I came back, I wrote the story, it was on the front page the next day. I was hooked. I was like, wow. So I for about 6 months, I was just doing stories as a student there.
Wow.
They called me in one day, and here's where the Utah connection is. Did you ever know Jim Wall?
No.
He was the publisher of the Deseret News for an extended period of time before he'd been at the Denver Post and others. He was down in Las Cruces. He was the publisher there. And he and the editor called me in and they said, we have a problem. The accountants are telling us that you're writing too many stories, we have to pay you. And I said, let me clarify. I could use the money. I just didn't want the opportunity. So journalism is where I got into. But then I got into political campaigns and market research because my wife was finishing her degree in education and I was doing a master's in organizational behavior. And we did a case study of the '84 Reagan-Mondale campaign.
Oh, wow.
You remember that?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That
I will not use your age against you.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly, one of the classic lines in politics. But what was fascinating about this,
your youth and inexperience
use against you, I know. It's such a fascinating that one. This case study was a man by the name of Richard Worthland, and it was showing how you could study the motivations of human beings to drive communication strategy.
Yeah.
And I was like, I went home that night, I was like, okay, I got to work for that guy. So I literally, this before LinkedIn.
Oh.
So I found somebody who knew Richard. Joseph B. Worthland's brother.
Oh, yeah.
Richard Worthland. Yeah. He later served in the church as well.
Yeah, Joseph's daughter was in my ward.
Okay.
I know that.
So
family.
you know that family, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I literally, once I finally got the phone number, I called his office once a month for a year.
Well, he was the main pollster for
He was Reagan's pollster, he was Reagan's chief strategist. And at that point, Reagan, this is in 95, 94, 95. And so he'd moved out of politics into corporate work, but was still doing some politics. But I talked with him I called every month and talked to his secretary most of the times. 2 or 3 times I got through to him. Until finally, right before Christmas, they called up and said, Richard says if you stop calling, we have a job for you. So I literally packed up.
So you wore him out.
I wore him out. And he was restarting his political team. This was in Contract with America time, Newt Gingrich, Trent Lott. Uh-huh. I didn't even ask what I was going to get paid. I said yes. So we moved out to Washington, D.C., and that set me on a course. I ended up doing politics for about 4 years, then got into corporate America.
See, I was a professor at Ole Miss, so I ran into Trent Lott a number of times.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got some Trent Lott stories that we can get another time. But that's what set me on a course. I was always interested in politics and journalism, but I knew that journalism wasn't going to be the career I wanted to pursue. So when I found market research, what I was fascinated about it is you can understand people.
Right.
And Richard had an axiom that he taught us all the time. It's like that you persuade by reason, you motivate through emotion, right? And that's the way that you truly move people. And they got to be linked. So I ended up spending a 30-year career that took me, I was with Worthland for about 10 years. Then I went to an ad agency who was one of our clients in Austin, Texas, lived there for 10 years. But while I was there, I started my own consulting company called Pursuit. And it basically brought in market research, brand strategy, and industrial design. And I sold that to Ipsos, which is the second largest player in the market research business. And that's when I got I got exposed to global markets with them. And we started a company called Strategy 3 for Ipsos that still runs today. But that's what I was doing when, probably right before COVID, I read a David Brooks article.
Oh.
And in fact, I just got to meet him for the first time and talk with him.
He's pretty amazing.
Really,
really
a great thinker.
I've gone to dinner with him, when he's come to the University of Utah.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Just a great guy. And he's very real. He's very who he is. And I love his thinking. But in that article, I think it was 2019, and he talked about this thing called Braver Angels. And he talked about it was like leaning into conflict with, treating people with respect and dignity, not contempt. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. At the time, my wife and I decided it was a year later, 2020, to move up to Utah, but we came up right in the middle of COVID.
Oh.
And I decided to get involved in Braver Angels because you couldn't meet your neighbors, you couldn't go to church, you couldn't, it was like such a weird time. And I just got hooked because I became a volunteer moderator of doing stuff. And so anytime I had spare time, I would do my volunteer stuff. So I do CASA, CASA, the Court Appointed Special Advocates for foster kiddos. Yeah. I do that. I did Braver Angels. And then I've worked on things like...
But were you still working in your company?
Yeah, I was doing my job. This is stuff I did when I had spare time.
Right.
Because I felt like, John, that as a country... I take it back to the Clinton years and then to today. You could see a trajectory where it's like we're getting further and further away at the federal level of getting anything done, and then at the community level of just being able to talk to each other.
Right.
And labels, to where we are now. We're at a totally different place now, and so I got involved in that, did that for about 5 years, and it was 6 months ago that. Within a 24-hour time period, I had 3 different people involved with Braver Angels. One called me, 2 texted me, or emailed one of the
And this is kind of a result of your volunteer work.
Yeah.
They got to know you.
They got to know me. We did some things. I did some stuff where you were involved in, which we can talk about. And in fact, one of the people was the lady from California who was in that session.
Okay.
She calls.
The first one that we did with the Democrats
Yeah.
on the DEI legislation.
Exactly. And she called me. She said, "Are you gonna apply for this job?" And I said, "What job?" She was the first one to contact me. I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, David Blankenhorn, who's one of the founders of Braver Angels in 2016, he's stepping down, and they're going to hire a new CEO for the first time, and they have an executive search firm. They're working on it, and I think you should do it." Now, she's a very progressive blue, in California, but she's like, "You should do this job." And then the next day, two people independently texted me the same thing. So I'm talking to my wife, and I'm like, this would be interesting. And I did a lot of thinking and praying about it.
That's kind of a tough talk because I'm sure that didn't result in a big pay increase.
No, it didn't. And we have as we've talked, we have a large family, 6 in college right now. And yeah, it was definitely not a pay increase. And so I waited till the last hour of the last day of their window of applications. But I knew I needed to put my name in. So I put my name in. Be a big change for me. But the next week, the executive search firm called and says, "Well, we got 400 or 500 applicants. We'll let you know." So I told Jody, I said, "I don't think you need to worry." Like, they have a lot of people. They probably already have somebody lined up. But sometimes, John, doors open up and we choose to walk through them.
Yeah.
And I knew in my heart, not arrogant way, I'm not saying this egotistical,
right.
just from a calling perspective of like wanting to do something good in the world. I was doing great in my career, making money, but I'm like, but what am I doing to leave society better for my kids and grandkids, right? So after 5 rounds of interviews, they offered me the job, and I'm like, okay. So then I'm now 9 weeks in.
Wow. Hey, we're going to talk about that some more. We're going to take a break. Okay.
Tired of media bias? Frustrated by political noise? PoliticIt.com cuts through the clutter, giving you real facts, clear analysis, and unbiased insight on the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay empowered. Whether it's elections, policy changes, or breaking news, we've got you covered. No spin, no agendas, just truth you can trust. Visit PoliticIt.com today, because informed citizens shape the future. PoliticIt.com, where politics meets clarity.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. We've got Maury Giles with us. Hey, great conversation so far. Let's talk more about, my first interaction with you really was during the DEI legislation.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with you, and you brought together a group of us that had very different opinions.
Very different opinions.
Right?
John, that's one of my...
Let's talk a little bit about that.
That's my favorite thing I've done in Braver Angels in the 5 years I've been involved. Now, as a CEO, there's new things I'm learning, but that was a perfect example of why I wanted to do and be involved in this further as CEO now. Because what was going on is, we've always done with Braver Angels, worked with the average American to be able to help reduce fear and anxiety and walk away from labels and be able to have a conversation with someone that's different. One of the biggest things that's misunderstood about the work we're doing is some people say, well, you're asking me to moderate and leave my views. Not at all. Other people say, you're asking me to be nice. No, we think you ought to be nice just because it's a good thing as a human being. We're asking instead to know your opinion, bring it to the table, and then be able to kind of Covey principles of seek first to understand, then to be understood, and try to find common ground so you can then build on that to integrate new solutions. So on DEI, what I got involved with Braver Politics, which is one part of our organization. And I've been pushing to say that we need to take these skills and work with state legislators to be able to put them into practice and to help inspire caucuses to be stood up in states. And we've got 4 states that have already done that, and I'm hoping Utah does one here on their own as well. But on the DEI thing, it was like, I wanted to say, what's the most divisive issue coming into, or that's got the most social media and intensity around it, which most times means that there's a lot of untruths that are being said on all sides of it. But let's do that. Let's take on that issue. And then I was directed to you. And that conversation we had that first day was one of the most profound personal experiences, because I was trying to invite you to come in and, hey, let's go into a situation where we're going to get the Democrats who are opposed and the Republicans who are opposing it, no press, no audience, just come into a private setting and do this thing that we call a common ground workshop. And talking to you about it was fascinating. What was your thought when we first talked?
Well, I was all for it. I mean, I don't have any problems speaking to people on the other side of issues, right? And people say I'm hard-headed sometimes in terms of what I want, but I saw this from the perspective of the university. I felt like the whole movement with the critical theories and everything was moving us away from a quest for truth, this whole idea of social justice, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what hit me really hard was the conversations in the U.S. House when the president of Harvard and the university president from Columbia, and they got into a debate there, and it was just interesting to me how this had moved Harvard University from Veritas, the truth, right, to really more focused on social justice and these ideas. And so I started doing a lot of research in it, and so that was a divisive issue at that time.
Yeah, and you started to be attacked and labeled, and a lot of personal things. That was one of the things you told me when we were talking, is that this is an intense issue because so many people are saying things. And when you get attacked and people are saying things about you, that all of a sudden shifts the conversation away from the topic and the issue and the merits of it and the debate to what's going to drive anger, so that you get people to then, at that point, people begin to make irrational decisions.
Yeah.
I really wanted you to join us, and I knew that for us to have this be successful, we needed to get people that were on very different sides of the issue to come and have the conversation.
Yeah, and those conversations are important. It's not that we came to an agreement over what the bill should be.
And we weren't trying to.
Yeah, and that I think that was the important point, though, right? You call this the crucial conversations, right? And I think the whole movement from Governor Cox towards this disagree better thing, I think there's been a lot of flack about that, right?
It's in his own state, and again, his own party is where he's had the most critique on that. Now, I personally got involved as a volunteer helping them with Gordon Larson and with the team on Disagree Better, because it was in the same spirit of what I was doing with Braver Angels.
Right.
And I understand the critique. It's a hard way to say, and I understand and I've talked to a lot of people that were critical of, well, he's not always living that behavior in the way he talks. And but what to me was powerful about what we did with elected officials in that, because we had 2 sessions, right? Probably about 6 or 7 hours together.
Yeah.
It might have even been 8. And what I saw happen, because to your point, we weren't trying to get legislation crafted. That wasn't the piece.
Right.
What we were trying to do is to say, let's see if we can get people to come together who have passionate views on this, to then seek first to understand, then to be understood, and figure out, are there any principles that can be agreed upon that are values and concerns, principles that would guide the way this is approached. And where I saw the biggest thing happen, John, is when you and other legislators in that room were talking about, and this is one of our most powerful questions as Braver Angels, instead of when someone says something that you disagree with and makes you feel a certain way, instead of just looking and doing it that way, of coming back with your retort, ask the question, tell me more about your life experience that shapes the way you view this issue. Because see, most people think that we choose our opinions, but we experience them and then we choose the behavior to do around them. So in that setting, when we had you all talking about your life experience and sharing stuff, it was really powerful. It was very powerful.
And
people recognizing things.
And I think there were things out of that. I remember after we passed the DEI legislation, right? It was Katie Hall's bill, started in the House. And what was unique about it is we came to a place where we said, you know what, it's important. There's certain things that have happened at the university that were important, right? I mean, helping first generation college students, helping kids that come from disadvantaged situations, right? Lower income. But one of the things we said was, can't we address those issues without making it about what color their skin was, right? Or their sexual orientation or anything else, right? Can't we deal with some of those things? And so we came up with this idea of student success centers, right? And I remember the article that came out in the Atlantic after that, that basically said that Utah solved the DEI problem without becoming Florida, which is kind of a, but what it was is it said, can we take the good out of what's going on, and can we still help students succeed, right?
Right, and if you look at, not everyone was happy with the outcome on very rarely you're going to get everyone happy on it, but what did happen is we had, I think it was 14 different principles that were unanimous agreement in the room, and not solutions, not legislation, but principles. And I saw things happen after that. If you watch the press coverage, you'd think we didn't do anything.
Right.
But I saw individual behavior and relationships that I know still exist today develop out of that piece of a better understanding, and that's what we were trying to accomplish.
Well, and that's what it's really about, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it doesn't mean that I have to move away from what I believe is truth.
Correct.
Right? It's just like that instance that I talked about with Harvard University moving away from this mission of veritas, right? Seeking the truth, somehow confusing that mission with this other mission that was important to them of social justice. And what is the function of the university itself, right? Yeah. And I think we come up with these things. I mean, one of the things I said in that other event that we had,
where you spoke at the dinner with Monica Guzman?
Yeah. The idea that we can disagree better, but sometimes we better disagree. And what I was trying to say with that is that if it's a matter of moving us towards a universal truth, we can't sacrifice that just to get along better, right?
Right.
We can't sacrifice our motivations, our feelings, but we can be more sensitive to the issues on others' parts, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the real power of what we're trying to do with Braver Angels, is trying to say that I go back to the Madisonian principles in the Federalist Papers, at least 10 and 14, where they were trying to get the Constitution passed, and one of the biggest arguments Madison said is, for this republic, for this constitutional republic to be successful, he was being attacked of people saying, this won't work when we get big, and we get diverse, and we get so many people be too big, too diverse. And he said, no, that's actually our strength. The diversity of opinion will be our strength, because remember, they were trying to get away from any majority being able to control minority, and any minority being able to dictate to a majority, and they created a system for that.
Well, and that's the beauty. That is the real beauty behind our whole constitutional republic.
Yeah.
Right, because
you need deliberative debate.
Yeah, the difference with a constitutional republic is the Constitution serves as the foundational truths that we can't violate,
and we can amend it.
Right.
And we have, and I think we should again in other ways, but it provides that framework.
But we made that very difficult.
Very difficult, high bar.
Right, there's a high bar.
As it should
there,
be.
And the reason why that high bar is that the advantage of a constitutional republic is it protects the minority. Right.
And you know what we also made hard? We made hard that no majority of a faction, there were many of the founders of the country that warned against factions, Washington, the biggest one. But what we created is a system that's also hard to be able to get your party to win in all the different chambers and run something through. And that was on purpose.
Right.
And that's my biggest concern, why I think states or the grown-ups in the rooms actually getting things done. And in the federal level, we're in a difficult place right now. It's one of my motivations for doing this is that if you can get more people, because what we're doing at Braver Angels is we're saying what needs to happen is courageous citizenship. That's our whole thing. Because What we're saying courageous citizenship is, it's first knowing what you believe, and then owning your agency to choose to act instead of react. So when you start to get upset or somebody's saying something you disagree with, we have to stop acting like someone giving a different point of view is some sort of aggression that I can't listen to. No, you have to listen to. That's life, and that's the way you engage. I think it's a deeper part of the human condition. Agency is at its core, and so our first pillar of courageous citizenship is personal agency. You can choose, even if you feel like you have no hope, you have no control, you can choose to act instead of react. And so at Braver Angels, we have tools to train you how to do that in a way to regulate your emotive response, to say, hold on, and try to listen and learn so that you can engage. The second pillar is then at the community level, act with others together to build or to solve. And we rely on our government to do that, and that's great, but we're trying to tell Americans that you don't have to wait for elected officials to work things out in your community. But electing elected officials is the reason we have a republic. They represent and they can do that. If we're more engaged, we're going to make better decisions on that, right? And then our third pillar, which we think is really critical to this union of the United States of America, is that we need to act in the shared national interest to protect it and to recognize that it's actually important that we remain the United States of America, not three different countries. And so when we pursue courageous citizenship, what we're actually saying is that's the path for you to be able to be a citizen, which was the office that Washington said was the greatest piece of there, the greatest office in a constitutional republic. And so we feel like we need to help inspire people to own that agency, and equip them and empower them to engage in collaborative action, and then help them recognize and have the courage to say, no, there is a shared national interest, rather than being true to party over country at all costs. Because the way the dominant narrative today, John, has framed everything on elections is that most people, I think, today who vote in elections believe that success means my party wins in every office and then I've succeeded. I don't agree with that. I don't think Madison would have agreed with that. I don't think that most of the founders would have, because the diverse thinking is what gets you to creative solutions and that you co-create.
That's great. We're about out of time, but why don't you leave us with some final thoughts? Number one, how do people get involved with this, right? And also, you know, you did a pretty good job of explaining kind of what you're trying to do, but what would you say to mom and pop at home watching this in terms of what they need to do and what their kids need to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the question. So first, I would say just in broad terms that we as a people need to reject the labels and reject the dominant narrative that there's a good side and an evil side on every issue, and that our job is to destroy the evil side. I'm not saying that if you feel something in life is evil that you shouldn't fight against it, but let's separate behaviors from people. The character and worth of every individual is the same, and they deserve that dignity, and you can't have conversation if you frame it that way. I know in my own family we experienced that of trying to, with a blended family, and on these issues of getting people to talk together in a way that say, no, listen to each other, don't just attack. So I think that's critical. But then if you feel like the things you've heard here are part of inspiring to you, then there are 11,000 organizations around the country at the hyper-local level who are doing things to try to get civic renewal, to understand how to participate. Braver Angels is the largest, because we're national. We have 124 of our alliances around the country. We have a lot of people here in the state of Utah are involved. Join us. Go to braverangels.org. You can become a part of that as a member. You can subscribe to the information we send out, but then you can also participate in skills training, in workshops, in working with elected officials. This holiday, we're rolling out, to reach more people and help with practicing this, we're rolling out an AI tool that will help you right before Thanksgiving to practice conversation with that family member that you're worried about having a political conversation at Thanksgiving, and using the power of technology to help say, okay, in an environment, how can I do that? And so get involved. And then the last thing I would say is, don't act like you don't have anything to do with the problems or the reality of our country today, because we own this. If there's any country in the world where we have the ability to shape it and shape the future, it's this one. And in the market research I've done on this topic, John, it fascinates me how few people have a comparative set of understanding of just how truly unique the United States of America is, of the free speech we have, of the ability to assemble, to be able to drive and to do these things. And if a lot of people feeling out of hope, out of control, and frustrated right now, but you start with you. You have the agency to act instead of react, and you can act together locally with people, and you can act in the best interest of a shared interest at the national level. Join us, do it. We need more.
Thank you. Maury Giles, great having you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me here.